Hello, everybody. Welcome. Bonjour, Anin, Cornin Indishnakas, Makwan Indudem. My name is Courtney Crane. I work in media and communications here at the First Nations Housing and Infrastructure Council. I am Soto Anishinaabekwe, a member of the Key First Nation in Treaty 4 territory in Saskatchewan. And I'm coming to you today from Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam territories. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you all so much for joining us. We're having our fourth speaker today in our Coming Home Storytelling series. We're very thrilled to have Blaney with us here today. We're really grateful to her for joining us and sharing her story with us. Faye is the fourth and final speaker in our Coming Home Storytelling series. And we'd like to thank the Department of Canadian Heritage for providing the funding so that we could bring this series to you. Before we begin, I think that you all saw the warning go up and the numbers that you can call. Just a reminder that we will be discussing some pretty heavy but very important subject matter. And so please, take good care and please call the numbers if you need to talk to somebody, and just a warning that, this can be very triggering subject matter. And so to please take good care of yourselves. I'm going to pass it over to our cultural leader, Doug Harris, to open up our session in a good way. Thanks so much.
Hi, Courtney. Hi, Squeal. Good day, everyone. And Doug Harris. Qualmochsne, Talhuilum. Tanit Stuminus. My name is Doug Harris. Traditional name I carry is Talhuilum. I'm from the Stuminus First Nations here on Mid-Vancouver Island. On behalf of First Nations Housing and Infrastructure Council and our Communications Department, it is my honor to share an opening prayer before we begin today. All my relations. Steeds de sjouw wenst. Si up nisel Juan. Na si ja. Na elish watlakwa. Heitsepka. De kwasielle. A ton of quail. I yatzelt. Eat watzelt. It will sense. Oh, oh, oh. Oh, tita simni, tihumni, armister to the Aish Qualwin. Oh, tita simni, hakushus to the not so much Qualwin. A ton of quail, eat a muck squail. Scotland's dead. Oh, sim. Aichka, thank you for being here today, Faye. Aichka.
Thanks so much, Doug. And now I'll pass it over to Faye Blaney. Thanks so much for being here today, Faye. We're really happy to have you.
Imot eham, imot hoigen kotas dienst ook het komaskut taie. Je like ook kam coach ega tumas ook hol olstenaie lukwenas. Imot. So I just wanted to start in my language because that's one of the markers of success for us as Indigenous people, that we still have our language in spite of what they have tried to erase in the residential school. So I'm a survivor of Seashelt Residential School and St. Mary's. And there were 4 generations in my family that went to residential school. And I really pride myself in raising my own children. I have 2 adult children, and I raised them through their whole childhood. So, and it's sad when you think about the generations before me that didn't have that luxury or that privilege. So my great grandfather, Johnny Blaney, went when he was 6 years old, and he went there for 10 solid years to St. Mary's. And in those years, he reached grade 3. So it tells you the level of importance that they placed on education in those institutions. For myself, I went to Seashelt when I was very young. I think I was about 7. And at that point, I was orphaned. And I later found out that my grandparents also were orphaned, and my parents' generation, they were orphaned as well. So I don't know how we managed to survive the years when we never had any parents and we were put into those institutions. Um, so we often, when I think about residential school, I think about what they have said their purpose was, and it was to continue until there wasn't a single Indian left. And so their goal was assimilation. And, that's a big, fancy, as my Auntie Lily would say, $10 word. Assimilation is a $10 word. But what in reality it meant was that they were trying to destroy our identity, our culture, and our spirituality, our language. And we were put into these total institutions, and I began to like scratch my head and wonder, what is a total institution? And those are there's prisons, there's concentration camps, there's monasteries, there's insane asylums, and we're in that category. We were put into a total institution that was really rigid. It was so tightly scheduled. And this part, I find, is where assimilation really happened, is with the mortification process that we went through, where we were stripped of our individuality and our collective identity. We had our hair removed. I refuse to cut my hair now. This is my hair, tons of it, and it's really long. I refuse to cut my hair because when I went there, my family thought that if they put a perm in my hair and made it look nice, that it wouldn't happen. But I arrived there, and they chopped off my hair, and they filled my head with kerosene. They put it all over my body. They operate on the assumption that I'm full of scabies and full of lice. And so it was horrifying. I was like 7 years old arriving there, and they took everything away from me, my hair, and they humiliated me, and they took away all my clothes. And um, as a sign of our resistance, we wear orange today because a woman kept her orange shirt in spite of what they were trying to do to us. And all our clothes were taken. We got standard issue clothing. We got a number. My number was 64. It was drilled into my head because I lost my belt for my uniform that I wore going to school, and I got whipped for losing my belt. And so number 4 is supposed to be on everything that they issued to me. We had a stigmatized identity. That is because they made us think that way. They told us that we weren't good enough. You know, we had our skin scrubbed so that we'd be whiter. And my brownness was unacceptable. My language was unacceptable. My parents were unacceptable. My culture and my language were unacceptable. It was a process of degrading and humiliating me. And it got to the point where, you know, our teaching is that children are sacred. And I was a child and I should have been treated as sacred. But instead, what happened is they taught me how to despise and hate myself, to loathe and to treat with contempt this body that I had. And that was reinforced over and over again. I remember at that age there was this one sister that looked after us, junior girls, and she would yank us out of bed with by one arm. And she did that because some of the girls were crying. One of them was my little sister Angela, and the other one was my cousin Sally. And they were younger and they were crying. They were homesick. And what they got for being homesick was they got whipped. They got lined up and stripped naked and spanked with this badminton rack that was plastic. And the rest of us, we were not crying, but her rule was that anyone that was awake would get the spanking as well. So we got yanked out of bed with our arms, and that was horrific. And for a little child to have to endure all of that. And these thoughts come to mind now as I'm an elder, and the young people are saying the elders aren't teaching them about what we went through in residential school. And I'm trying to find ways to talk about what happened to me and to talk about how it has impacted the next generation, the intergenerational trauma that we have inflicted upon the next generation. And it's not a pretty picture. You know, we came away from there with so much self-hatred, a lifelong experience of self-hatred, and it's very difficult to turn that ship around, especially with the colonization process that continues to happen to our communities where we don't have the programs and services to address what has happened to us. You know, we have sexual violence, we have wife battering, we have incest against the children, we have high suicide rates and addictions problems, drug dealing. Like we've got all these horrible things that we have to live with, the fallout of residential school. And how do we explain that to the youth, you know, the condition that we're in? And how do we explain it to the non-native people who are saying to us, why aren't you over it already? Get over it. And so I think that that's one key piece to understanding our history is the self-hatred that was instilled in us over the 10 years that we were there. They taught us through and through to hate ourselves. And our task now is to rediscover the love that was passed on through our culture. Our culture had so much love, and it was the women. We had a matriarchal tradition, and the women were responsible for building relationships in our communities and relationships with the animal nations and with the other beings out there, the rocks, the mountains, the trees, all of that. We were responsible for building those relationships, and those were relationships filled with love. And the way that we showed our love is with our salmon ceremony, for instance. When you're getting your first salmon of the year, you have a ceremony to celebrate the salmon nations for feeding us yet again. And we have a ceremony for when we see the first berry of the year, and we celebrate those nations for giving of themselves so that we can live fulfilling lives. And, we've lost so much in terms of our culture and our tradition, and we've had so much shame surrounding those things. We had it outlawed even under the Indian Act, the potlatch ban, where we weren't allowed to have our culture and our traditions. And, it's we were displaced. We seemed like we were refugees in our own homelands because of all of that. But it's up to us now to reclaim who we are, our identity and our language and our traditions and our practices. The residential school forced us to be incapable of thinking for ourselves and to make decisions for ourselves because our schedules were so regimented. They were so strict on what we had to do, when we had to do it, and how we had to do it. And so now, it's on us. They're long gone, those horrible people that did those things to us. And now it's our responsibility to address what happened. It's our responsibility to begin making good decisions for ourselves and good decisions for the future generations. It's so hard to witness the deaths of the young ones and the addictions. And Omelco has had so many deaths during COVID, and they weren't COVID related. Most of them were alcohol or drug related, and a few elders, not too many, but mostly the young people. And when COVID ended, we had a blanketing um, ceremony for the families that we couldn't support during COVID. It's in our tradition to support each other when we're losing loved ones. And so we blanketed the families of the people that we'd lost. And our community is pretty small. We were under 500 with probably about 200 living on reserve. I think we blanketed over 30 people, maybe 35 people in that time of COVID. And so, we're faced with so much grief and so much loss, so much destruction of our families and our family units, and yet we continue to hang together, and even though we aren't um, actively telling our stories the way they did when I was a child. I remember the stories that I was told growing up about Kaich. Kaich is our trickster, which is the mink. And Kaich always did crazy things, and Kaich was teaching us what not to do because he was always dying. And so, I grew up hearing those stories, and it taught me how to be a good human being. And even though we don't have that happening for us anymore, we're very blessed that our culture continues to thrive anyway in ways that aren't put into words, but the deeds, the things that people do, the generosity, like that's number one for Khomasku people is we were known for our generosity and our humility. And we continue to live that way, even though the stories and the teachings aren't there any longer. Um, I wanted to speak about my resistance of what I did when I was in residential school. One of the things I did, I went to Sechelt in the early 60s and I went to St. Mary's in the early 70s. And already the master tuition agreement was in place in the second round of residential school. And that's a system. I probably don't have time to talk about the 1951 amendment to the Indian Act that changed a lot of the ways that we were educated. But one of the things that came out of the master tuition agreement was putting us into the category of special needs. And when I went to St. Mary's, there were just over 350 kids in the residential school, and we were all in special needs. And we continue to be in that mode today. In Humelco, a lot of our kids are put into these special needs classrooms, and that denies us access to an academic education. So, this is one of the ways that I resisted in residential school. Myself and one other young woman my age, we went in to see the nun who was in charge of our schooling. We were terrified, I tell you, we were so scared. But we went up to her and we asked her, we said, we don't want to be in modified English and general math and basic science. We want to be in the academic program. And she was furious with us and she said she would give us a chance, but if we stepped out of line, she was going to put us right back into those special needs classrooms. So in grade 9, I got um, academic math and I did really well in algebra and I did well in English as well. And so that was one of my gifts I realized was my ability to pursue education. And that was one of my forms of resistance. Another one was this is crazy, crazy, crazy. I know. I don't know what I was thinking, but I organized a girls' committee. It's so funny when I think about it today because I continued to be very active in women's politics. But I organized a girls' committee, high school girls, and I just went around asking these different young, like senior girls that were around me if they wanted to join my committee. And I was telling them that our committee could do this, could do that. And I guess the main interest we had was to determine what we would do on Saturday night. That was our one free moment in residential school life. All the rest was scheduled and structured. But after our day of heavy duty cleaning on Saturday night, we were able to do something like roller skating or going to a movie or dancing or whatever it was. And I wanted to have a say in that. So I organized the girls' committee and I got grounded. So that was my other resistance. And I guess the third one is the language. And I still have the accent, even though I'm not a fluent speaker anymore. I'm almost a fluent speaker, but I still have my accent from speaking in my language. And so in St. Mary's, I got slapped across the face for speaking in my language. I was passing my brother in the hallway and I was talking to him, and the supervisor came and slapped me. But we hung on to our language in spite of what they were trying to do to us. And I've done a fair amount of, I'm just checking the time here, so I still have a bit of time. I wanted to talk about some of my own achievements in my life in spite of that childhood of being orphaned and having survived the residential school and just having the stack deck in front of me working against me. I did go to university. I think even before that, I worked for the Union of BC Indian Chiefs with the late, great George Manuel, and I learned so much from him. I participated in the occupation of the regional headquarters of Indian Affairs, um, and we called ourselves the Concerned Aboriginal Women. We went there because 5 children had died in a house fire in Lillooet, and those women organized at 3 in the morning after those children died in the fire, and they came straight down to Vancouver and occupied Indian Affairs for 8 days. And I got called, and I'm just so grateful that I got called. I went in and oh no, they're not answering the phone in the house. I participated in that occupation for 8 days, and I just grew up. In those 8 days, those elders grew me up, and I learned so much about the importance of my own identity. You know, up to then, I had this crazy wish. I wished that some white family would have adopted me rather than me being bounced around all over the place. And I didn't realize what a blessing it was that I didn't get that, because I know the horrors that people have gone through in the child welfare system. But I went to university and I've been very active in women's politics in the years. I've taken on a feminist perspective on issues, and I was called on to be an expert witness in the national inquiry. I still really work hard to address the violence against Indigenous women. And on my reserve right now, I'm starting a sexual violence program, and it's an uphill struggle because the level of normalization of violence is so deep. And so I'm pretty happy, even though I'm 65 and supposed to be retired, I'm still working. I have a lot to share, and I'm trying to do that to the best of my ability in my community. Um, I started off with my addictions, and I stopped drinking and drugging when I worked with the Union of BC Indian Chiefs. And next month, or like November the 18th, I will be celebrating 40 years of sobriety. So I've role modeled sobriety to my children. I have two adult children, 32 and 37, and neither of them have ever touched alcohol or drugs and have no desire to do so. I am so proud of them, Andrew Paul Campbell and Karina Marie Wilson. And I just really wanted to end off by talking about what Marie Sinclair says. You know, one of the things, he said so many brilliant things. One of the things he says is that education is what got us into this mess, and it's education that'll get us out of it. And so we really need to focus on the education of the broader society in what has happened in the residential school era, what continues to happen with the foster care system that's stealing our children at much larger rates than residential school ever did. Um, the fact that we've got such a large number of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls that really needs serious attention. I know that Marie Sinclair called on the government to have a system of accountability in place to measure, benchmarks, champions. He called it a National Council for Reconciliation, and that still hasn't happened. The federal government still does not have a system in place to measure progress, to see if they are in fact applying the principles that were recommended in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I know for a fact that the strategies for the public school system is not working. Um, Supposedly, we have reconciliation teachings, like in the curriculum, there's more in the curriculum around what happened to us. And from the kids in my community, they talk about coming into those classrooms and learning from a non-native person about the plants and the vegetation in the territory that we live in. It's not even using our traditional names or our traditional medicines. So we have a long way to go, but we're, as Geraldine Webster says, still here. I'm still here, and I'm here to make sure that there's accountability for those missing children, that have been in unmarked graves in all these years. And the TRC report recommendations from number 71 to 76 was already highlighting the fact that there were so many children that were in these unmarked graves, and the government denied them access to the systems they needed in order to address those issues. And they hid it for as long as they could. And we're lucky that there are leaders in the Indigenous community that insist on bringing out the truth. And I hope that I'm one of those elders, that I'm a truth teller, a truth speaker. And I try to speak those truths in my language as well. And I really take seriously those recommendations on the importance of language. And so, yeah, I'm coming home. I have a group that are going to Seashell. We just started our caravan today, and we've traveled from Homelco in Campbell River to here in Paul River, and we're going on to Seashell tonight. And tomorrow we're going to tour the museum there in Seashell of what the residential school was like. I haven't been back there for a very long time. It'll be something else to see the place that hurt me so much in my childhood. And we're going to also tour their longhouse again. How are we resilient? They, even though our culture and our potlatch systems, or those our cultural traditions were banned, they're doing it in Seychelles, and they're going to tour us through that. And when we return home on no, not Wednesday, Thursday, when we return home on Thursday, we're going to receive the welcome that we never got. We never got a welcome home when we came home. We were strangers to our elders because we were speaking in a foreign language and had definitely foreign values. And so we're going to be going home, and we're going to be welcomed back into the community, and we're going to have a huge feast and a big celebration. And so we're celebrating that we're still here and we're going back home. So I thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share my own experience and my family's experience of residential school, and most importantly, to share the fact that I have survived, that I'm thriving, and that I'm continuing on this struggle to reclaim our identity, land back, all of that important stuff that goes into decolonization, all my relations.
Haichka, Faye. Haichka. Good medicine. Thank you for sharing your story. Wanted to close with the song Nanucha Chat the Salt Squalst. It's our language is sacred. And my late Uncle Willie blessed us with a song for us to use in our education here at the school. And Faye, you're so right with our language. And I feel every time I have an opportunity to share opening and or closing prayer, it's an opportunity for me to grow, just being able to use song, the drum. And again, thank you for today, Faye. Haichka. Nucha Chat the Salt Squalst. Nanucha had a salt squalst. Nanucha had a salt squalst. Nanucha had a salt squalst. Hey, 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 ho. Oh, 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 hey, hey, ho. Nanucha had a salt squalls. Nanucha had a salt squalls. Nanucha had a salt squalls. Hey, 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 ho. Oh, 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 hey, hey, ho. Nanucha had a salt squalst. Our language is sacred for sure. Again, thank you, Faye. Haichka. Hait squale.